All right, so right now the code works for these three ratings, specifically 3, 2, and 1. But what if the rating is something else entirely? Like 0 would be an easy one, or 23. But what if it's also A, or good, something like that? We're not accounting for it. We won't print anything out at all. It's just ignored, and our code doesn't really display anything, or doesn't display anything, period, to the user. To fix this, we can add in a third piece to our conditional. We have if, else if, and we have else. Else is kind of like the otherwise part of the conditional. It's the thing that runs if nothing else was true before it, then the code inside of else will be executed. So you can see down here, we don't specify a condition inside of parentheses like we do for if and else if, because it just runs no matter what if nothing else ran first. So we can add in an else down here. It just looks like this. And in our situation, if rating is not 3, 2, or 1, else will run. If rating is 3, 2, or 1, else will not run. Just like if rating is 3, nothing else runs. If rating is 2, nothing else runs after it, and so on. Else is the fallback. It is the final piece of your conditional. You don't have to have an else, but if you want to have one, you must have an if. It doesn't make sense to have an otherwise if there is no initial if. So we'll just console.log invalid rating. We'll save, refresh the page, and we end up with invalid rating. If we have anything other than 3, 2, or 1, we get invalid. If we go back to 2, oh, that's a string, so that won't work because we're comparing with triple equals for exactly the number 2. But if we go back to the number 2, it works just fine. So often we do have an if and else if, or multiple else ifs and else. And by the way, I forgot to mention, we can only have one else per if. It doesn't make sense to have more than one otherwise. We can have as many else ifs as we want, and we have one if at the beginning. So sometimes we have all of them together, but often we'll just have a yes or no, a simple if and an else. So here's an example. I have a high score variable and a user score. So the idea is that we have a game or something where we have a high score, like an old arcade cabinet where it stores the highest score ever on that cabinet, and then the current user score. And we could write a conditional that just checks if the user score is greater than, we could even do equal to. I'm not sure what happens if you equal the high score on a game. Do you then become the high score? Let's say that's how it works. So if user score is greater than or equal to the current high score, we will console.log, let's do a template literal. Congrats, you have the new high score of, and then let's add it in, and we'll show user score. Then we could also update high score to now equal user score. If what the user scored is higher than the current high score, then high score should become that score. And then we can add in an else, and we'll console.log another template literal, good game, your score of, and then user score with our $sign to interpolate it, did not beat the high score of, and then high score. All right, so if we run this right now, refresh, we get good game, your score of 1200 did not beat the high score of 1430. If we change this to now be 1600, congrats, you have the new high score of 1600. So here we have a simple yes or no. It's either this, and if it's not, then it's this. There's no scenario where we won't have, well, I guess you could write code that breaks. You could write something that causes an error, but assuming that doesn't happen, one of these is going to run. We don't have a bunch of else ifs, we just have a simple if and an else.